Hello and welcome back to my channel. And if this is your first time watching, well, thank you for clicking. And I hope you enjoyed the second tier of the Missing Persons Iceberg. This one took me a bit to make. I was busy most of the time and I couldn't really find the time to just sit down and type out a script and record, but I have some time and I'm going to take advantage of it now. This one is also going to follow the same format as the last one, which, I mean, it's going to be the same regardless. I don't know what else you could do to change the format of these types of videos anyway. I don't think they really need to change. So anyway, without further ado, here we go. Kathie McCormack. This one is going to be a little different because I tried looking everywhere I could possibly look for information regarding her. There isn't any biographical information I could find about her, just very, very brief details about her. And all these details came from reading about her then at the time husband, Robert Durst. So I'll give you what I can about her, but this is going to be a pretty short one. From what I could find, Kathie was 29 at the time and in medical school, which she was studying to be a pediatrician. I couldn't find much detail about this, but shortly after she met Robert Durst, he was a real estate heir and eldest son to Seymour Durst, a real estate magnate. Robert then moved to Vermont in January of 1972 because he had just opened a health food store, but then soon returned to New York City because Robert's father wanted him to work within the family business. Returning to Manhattan, they married on April 12, 1973, and there Kathie was actually almost done with her schooling around the time she had disappeared. She was attending Albert Einstein College of Medicine, and she was last seen on January 31st, 1982, but then had suddenly reappeared at a dinner party thrown by her friend. Forgive me for the pronunciation, Gilbert Najami. Najami was acquainted with Kathie, so when he noticed that she was wearing red sweatpants, he knew something was odd, because Kathie was not known to dress so casually when out in public. She then left the party in the evening for her home after she was called by her husband, and this was officially the last time anyone had seen her. According to Robert, he had spoken to her on the phone later that evening, but was later found out that he just went to bed and never actually called her. And this is also something that he had told some film directors for a documentary series that was called The Jinx, which was an investigative series that delved into Robert's crimes because, guess what? This wasn't the only thing that he did. Kathie was also included in the documentary too, but getting back to it, later on in that same evening, Kathie's friend, Najami, became concerned and upset after Katie was nowhere to be found, because the two were supposed to meet up at a pub called the Lionsgate in Manhattan, but unbeknownst to essentially everybody, this was the last time that she would be seen by anybody. And pretty much after this moment, there isn't much information about the disappearance because her husband, Robert Durst, was a pretty rich dude with an even more rich and powerful family in New York. So I don't want to say that they covered it up, but that's kind of essentially what sort of happened. So for years after this, nobody knew what happened and there was barely any kind of investigation. That is until recently, where they did find some substantial evidence to indicate that he did murder a couple of other people. But that's a whole other story in and of itself, and I'd rather just keep it to Kathie. Some other little bits to include was that people knew that the couple were kind of hands-on with each other, meaning that Kathie did at one point show up at the hospital with bruises from an argument that the two had had. But yeah, unfortunately, most of this information is conveyed through Robert Durst, so I mean, it isn't all that much reliable. And the only thing we really have to go off is pretty much what other people saw physically that was wrong with Kathie at the time. Maura Murray. Maura Murray was born on May 4th, 1982 in Hanson, Massachusetts. The fourth child of Fred and Laura Murray. She was a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. There, she disappeared on February 9th, 2004. Maura drove to New Hampshire, where she crashed her car on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, and disappeared afterwards. 3 months prior to her disappearance, in November 2003, Maura was found guilty of using a stolen credit card to order fast food. The charge, however, was dismissed after 3 months on good conduct or behavior, whatever you want to call it. On February 5th, a couple of days before her disappearance, Maura broke down in tears on a phone call with her sister because she was concerned about her sister's relationship with her fiancé. On February 8th at 2:30 a.m., after a dorm party, she left for her father's motel to return his car, who was in town to see Maura. At 3:30 a.m., while she was on her way to her father's motel, she hit a rail with her father's car, causing around $10,000 worth of damage to the car. A phone call was placed to her boyfriend from her father's phone. This was around 4:49 a.m. The content of this call is still not known. Later on in that morning, her father Fred learned that the auto insurance would cover the damage to his vehicle. He rented a car, dropped Maura off at campus, and then left for Connecticut. They had agreed to discuss the insurance claims and forms next Monday before she disappeared. A few days after that accident, a local resident reported a car on the road to the police. The police received 2 phone calls. The first call was made at 7:27 p.m. and the second one was at 7:43 p.m. A local bus driver later told police that he had seen a woman standing outside the black Saturn, the vehicle that Maura had been driving. The police then arrived at the scene around 7:46 p.m. There was no one inside or outside the car, and the car was locked. No one was found within the premise after the initial search was conducted. The police found things in the car that belonged to Maura, including gloves, compact discs, makeup, diamond jewelry, directions to Burlington, Vermont, Maura's stuffed animal, and Not Without Peril, a book about mountain climbing. Later, searching through Maura's computer revealed that she had searched for the directions to Berkshires in Burlington, Vermont, before disappearing. Several phone calls also confirmed that she telephoned about booking hotels in Vermont, but never made any reservations. Reports also say that she was allegedly sighted 6 to 8 kilometers away from where the accident happened by someone that night around 8:30 to 9 p.m., but it was reported 3 months later. Later, various searches were conducted, but almost all of them were non-conclusive. However, in an interesting turn of events, a man in late 2004 gave Maura's father a rusty and stained knife claiming that it belonged to the man's brother and he might have used it to kill Maura. But these claims were denied by his family, accusing him of being a drug addict and doing this for reward money. Even more mind-boggling in these events, a 2-day search in October 2006 was conducted where cadaver dogs found in a closet of an A-frame house was the scent of possible human remains. In a shocking revelation, the house was revealed to be owned by the man implicated by his brother from earlier. After finding this out, Maura's father, Fred, criticized the agencies for treating it as a missing persons case and not a criminal matter. Fred then reiterated his belief on various occasions that his daughter was dead, and he believed that the remains labeled as possible human remains were probably his daughter's. To further prove these claims, they demanded to search the house. On April 3rd of 2019, a basement search of the home was conducted. The authorities dug up the basement, but just like the other searches, this attempt was unsuccessful. They had only found an old piece of pottery and a piece of piping. In the most recent development, the FBI made a violent criminal apprehension profile for Maura Murray in January 2022, aiming to collect information regarding the case from different agencies since the incident. Despite the attempts to solve this crime, with all the information and lack of evidence in this case, this seems like a dead end. Brian Schaffer. Brian Schaffer was a 27-year-old second-year medical student at Ohio State University, where he went missing on the night of March 31st, 2006. His mother passed away of bone cancer during the same month in 2006. Although his friends said that Brian processed his mother's demise with a strong spirit, many also said that it took a great toll on him. The disappearance of Brian Schaffer is very suspicious, pointing to possibilities of foul play or just a way to escape his life and probably start a new one. Unfortunately, the mystery remains unsolved, and authorities have not been able to come up with an answer even to this day. The dots remain unconnected. March 31st, Friday, was the last day on campus before spring break. Brian had plans with his girlfriend, Alexa Wagner, another second-year medical student at OSU. Those close to Brian disclosed that he had plans to propose to her during spring break over in Miami. The night of his disappearance, Brian had spent the evening with his father. They dined out at a local steakhouse. His father described him as being tired and nervous for his upcoming exams, and he looked exhausted and extremely worn out. He thought Brian would spend the rest of the evening taking his time to relax and unwind, but he had plans with his friend. Later that night, around 9 p.m., Brian met his friend and roommate, William Clint Florence, at the Ugly Tuna Saloon Bar, located in the South Campus Gateway Complex on High Street in Columbus, where they drank their weariness away from their spring exams. About an hour later, Brian called his girlfriend, who was headed to see her parents before their departure to Miami. Brian also confirmed their trip and planned to reunite with her the Monday morning. After a few shots at the Ugly Tuna, Brian and Florence took a stroll to the Arena District. They went pub crawling, where they took a couple shots at different bars. Close to midnight, they met Meredith Reed, one of Florence's friends in Short North, who offered them a ride back to the Ugly Tuna. All three friends entered the bar for one last round of shots. CCTV footage outside the Ugly Tuna verified that all three took the elevator to the bar's second floor at around 1:15 a.m. For unknown reasons, the footage showed that Brian re-emerged from the bar before 2 a.m., this time alone, and was seen having a casual chat with two women in their 20s and then walking back towards the bar entrance before disappearing completely. While the three were there, Brian was isolated from his friends. Florence and Reed tried to call him repeatedly after he vanished but couldn't reach him. At 2 a.m., the bar closed and they waited for him outside. They returned home when they couldn't find him among the departing crowd and repeated unanswered calls. Brian's father and Wagner called his phone several times but had no luck. He missed his flight to Miami on Monday morning, which he had long planned with his girlfriend. He was then pronounced a missing person that day. Something to note, Brian's father tragically died in a windstorm in September 2008, never knowing the fate of his son. From the day he went missing to this day, various theories have surfaced regarding the strange vanishing of Brian. One of the theories suggests that he might have taken an emergency exit from the bar as a shortcut. The backside of the bar opened to a chaotic construction site, which was mostly closed for being an unstable area. He might have fallen into a hole or a pit at the construction site, but this doesn't really make any sense, as the police or construction workers would have eventually found a body if he did indeed fall into something. It was also speculated that he might have moved away temporarily to mourn the loss of his mother. Some people also suspected foul play because his friend Florence refused to opt in for a lie detector test. His attorney stated that Florence had told everything he knew and that further investigations were causing pain and trouble to his family. Or, going off the previous theory, he might have fled to escape his identity and start a new life. This theory specifically surfaced when a homeless man with an uncanny resemblance to Brian was seen in Tijuana, Mexico in 2020. But after a thorough facial analysis by the FBI, it was proved that the man wasn't Brian. Moreover, his family insisted that there wasn't any notion for him to escape his identity or fake his disappearance. His family started to lose hope that he might even be alive when none of his credit cards, bank account, or cell phone were used in over a year. Brian would be 42 today. Brian, whether alive or dead, would be 42 today. His story remained in the public eye for quite some time. Central Ohio Crime Stoppers also offered a $100,000 reward for any information regarding Brian that has yet to be claimed. Tammy Lynn Leppert. Tammy Lynn was born on February 5th, 1965. She was an American actress, model, and beauty queen who disappeared under strange circumstances on July 6, 1983. On July 1982, Tammy finished shooting for a teen movie, Spring Break, which was expected to earn nearly $25 million at the box office. After the film shooting was completed, Tammy took an out-of-town trip for a weekend party. She went unaccompanied, and the people who knew her said she had returned as a different person. Wing, one of Tammy's mother's clients, had been living at their house since he was 11 and would frequently ask her what was at the forefront of her mind and the on and off chance that anything was irritating her. She would generally avoid these questions. She would either steer the conversation in a different direction or say nothing was irritating her and attempt to dismiss it. Soon after returning back, Tammy started acting paranoid. On various occasions, she would ask Wing to pick up the calls for her and tell them she wasn't home. Linda, her mother, noticed her behavior and asked what the matter was. Upon inquiry, Tammy revealed that she had seen something awful that she wasn't supposed to see and was afraid someone would kill her. Unfortunately, Tammy never opened up about the information because she was scared they might come after her. Linda tried to figure out the situation, but Tammy never gave away the entire truth. In March of 1983, she was offered a role in the Scarface film. While on set, there was a shooting scene, and fake blood was shot off. Tammy hysterically panicked and started sobbing. The director described that she was crying and shaking so much that they had to take her back to the trailer, where she vaguely mentioned something about money laundering. She was probably having a panic attack and looked intimidated. She called off the shooting for this film and went back home. Tammy's mother was very concerned and even took her to the sheriff, but Tammy never disclosed fully that her life was in danger. Tammy spent 72 hours in Brevard County Mental Health Center for a detailed psychological analysis. No evidence of drugs or alcohol was found in her body, and she was sent back home after observation. On July 6, 1983, the day she had gone missing, Tammy met with her friend Keith and were headed to the beach. According to Keith, he picked her up in the morning and planned to spend the day at the oceanside. But on their way, they were involved in an argument, and Tammy demanded to be let out in the parking lot of the Glass Bank building in downtown Cocoa Beach. He dropped her off at around 3 p.m. Apparently, she was not carrying any kind of bag or identifying information. Later that evening, Tammy tried calling the Cocoa Beach costume shop 3 times, which was owned by her aunt. She also left an urgent message, but unfortunately, her aunt couldn't get to it as she was out of town then. She also tried contacting her friend, who didn't answer either. It was the last time she was ever heard or seen. Now, what exactly was it that an 18-year-old girl could have seen that made her fear for her life? We won't know, as it was never revealed what it could have been. As per the U.S. Customs Service, many tax evasion and money laundering cases in Florida were under government examination. Some call it a sheer coincidence. Linda thinks it is no coincidence by any means. She feels that Tammy was either a causality of injustice or has amnesia. The question remained unanswered, adding to the baffling intensity of this mysterious disappearance. Could she have been in the wrong place at the wrong time and witnessed some kind of money laundering? Who knows? The Sodder Children. On December 25th, 1945, Christmas Day, the people of Fayetteville, West Virginia were woken up to a heart-wrenching tragedy. The home of George and Jenny Sodder caught on fire. George, Jenny, and 9 of their 10 kids were residing in the home. The other was their son, who was away in the army. When the house caught fire, both parents, along with 4 of their children, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr., were able to escape the burning house, but in the distressing turn of events, 5 of the rest of the children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were never found. They essentially vanished without a trace. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, the Sodder family went to bed just like any other day. Later, after midnight, their mom, Jenny, was woken up 3 times to some strange sounds on the roof, but dozed off again. After almost half an hour of hearing these peculiar sounds, Jenny was awakened to intense smoke filling the room around the telephone wires and George's office. When they raced outside, George realized 5 of his children were still inside. He dashed outside, wanting to contact them through the higher-up windows. However, the ladder he generally kept set against the house was peculiarly absent. A plethora of thoughts raced through his mind, trying to figure out a way to save his children, but were all in vain. While the rampaging smoke from the burning house fogged up the air and baffled their minds, George kept hysterically screaming and calling out the names of his children that he didn't even notice his arm was cut and covered in blood. His daughter, Marion, ran to a neighbor's home to call the Fayetteville Fire Department, yet couldn't get any response from the operator. A neighbor who saw the blazing fire called from a close-by bar, but yet again, no administrator answered. Exasperated, a neighbor then found Fire Chief F.J. Morris, who started Fayetteville's rendition of an alarm, a telephone tree framework by which one fireman called another, who then called another. The local group of firefighters was just more than 2 miles away, yet the team didn't show up until 8 in the morning. So all in all, the Sodders' home had been diminished to a smoking heap of debris. George and Jeannie expected that 5 of their kids were dead, yet a short hunt on the grounds on Christmas Day showed no hint of remains. Chief Morris proposed that the burst had been hot enough to incinerate the bodies. A state police investigator brushed the rubble and credited the fire to a broken piece of wiring. George covered the storm cellar with 5 feet of soil, meaning to save the site in remembrance of his children. 5 death certificates were issued by the coroner's office not long before the new year, crediting the causes to fire or suffocation. But the Sodders started wondering if their children were still alive because many of the house appliances were found covered in ash, which was still identifiable. Another solid piece of information adding to the mysterious vanishing was by the employee at the local crematorium, who confirmed that even if human bodies are burned at 2000 degrees Fahrenheit constantly for 2 hours, the human bones would still remain. The fire was then linked to many suspicious events, one being George's statements about the fascist government. George was a very outspoken person about the government, and they believed someone might have done it out of sheer pettiness. The children might have been kidnapped by someone who broke into the house from the front door during this havoc and lured them in by proposing to take them somewhere safe. When the sighting of the Sodder children began, many theories came in when a passerby confirmed that he saw the children leaving in a car with some adults while they watched the blazing flames. For almost 40 years, anybody driving down Route 16 close to Fayetteville, West Virginia, could see a billboard bearing the grainy pictures of 5 kids, their names and ages: Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5, stenciled underneath alongside hypothesis about what has been going on with them. The mystery of the Sodder children still lives on, but the case really drifted off the public eye after the demise of George and Jenny Sodder, unfortunately. Lars Mittank. What started as a lighthearted Eastern European getaway finished in a family's most dreaded fear. Lars Mittank, a 28-year-old man from Berlin, Germany, took a holiday to Bulgaria with his friends in 2014, but never returned home. Minutes before loading onto his trip back home, Mittank escaped a bustling airport in Varna, experiencing a head injury he had suffered during a fight a couple days back. He vanished into the forest field encompassing the air terminal, gone forever, and was never seen again. Lars Mittank has been missing for more than 8 years now. Unfortunately, the perplexing event remains unsolved to this day. According to his friends, almost a week after arriving in Bulgaria, Mittank got into a fight with 4 local men at a bar. The altercation started when they argued about which soccer club was better, SV Werder Bremen or Bayern Munich. Mittank, being a Werder supporter, also made some counter-offensive remarks. Following the dispute, Mittank left the bar before his friends and wasn't seen again for the rest of the night until the morning. When he finally met them at Golden Sands Resort, he told his friends that those 4 men at the bar and other locals had beaten him up. He suffered serious injuries involving a displaced jaw and a punctured eardrum. Mittank consulted a local doctor who prescribed him antibiotics to prevent further infection. The doctor made him cautious that flying with a ruptured eardrum might be dangerous and advised him to rest until the wound completely healed. His friends also generously offered to stay with him until he recovered, but he persisted with them to catch the booked flight and scheduled himself a later flight. He later checked into a hotel near the airport. This was when he started exhibiting bizarre and eccentric behavior. He was essentially overpowered by paranoia and anxiety. During this time, he made a phone call back home, asking his mom to cancel all his credit cards and expressing his anxious thoughts that someone intended to kill him. He believed he was still being pursued by the group of strange men, reportedly the ones who had beaten him up the other night. As per the CCTV film of that hotel, Mittank was seen bothered, pacing all over the hotel foyer, glancing out the windows. He even hid in the hotel elevator for many hours. The next day, Mittank went to Varna Airport, where he met with the airport doctor to discuss if his ear had healed adequately to permit him flying home. During the discussion, it seemed that the two were intruded on by a man from the airport construction site. Then at that point, something unusual occurred. The airport physician, Dr. Kostov, later said that Mittank shuddered when he saw a construction worker enter the room and cried, "I cannot die here. I need to leave. I have to get out." At one point, Lars Mittank got up from the chair he was sitting on, left his wallet, mobile phone, and luggage at the specialist's office, left the room, and ran out of the terminal across its forecourt. Numerous surveillance cameras record him escaping across the airport, wearing just a shirt and shorts before climbing a wall and vanishing into a field of sunflowers, after which he was never found again. It was as if he vanished into thin air. The mysterious vanishing of Lars Mittank remains one of the most mind-boggling and eccentric events in the missing persons iceberg. While it is possible that he truly was being sought after, it appears more probable that his head injury, perhaps doubled by the impacts of the antibiotics he was recommended, or some other substance he had ingested during the occasion, set off a maniacal episode of some sort. While his mom keeps looking for leads concerning her son's vanishing, and despite long periods of examination from Germany's Federal Criminal Police Office, no substantial leads have at any point turned up. With several other theories, it was also suggested that Mittank had a psychological issue. Paranoid schizophrenia, for instance, can cause suspicious delusions about being sought after or being in unavoidable peril. Nonetheless, Mittank's family said he had no set of experiences of psychological illness or a manic episode, and no one in their family has at any point been determined to have schizophrenia. One of the theories suggests his disappearance was that he might have ended up being a victim of human trafficking. It was revealed that in the European Union, the rate of human trafficking is at its highest in Bulgaria. Many locals and travelers have been taken despite their desire to the contrary and constrained into sex work, drug pirating, or being utilized as slaves. They have additionally been killed for their organs. As revealed by Caso Criminal, a few sources have indicated the ones who went after Mittank were involved with drug or organ dealing and may have been chasing after him to be utilized in their dealing ring. This enigma yet remains a perplexing tale that baffles the minds. Oscar Zeta Acosta. Oscar Zeta Acosta Fierro, born on April 5, 1935, was a Mexican-American lawyer, politician, emerging writer, and advocate in the Chicano movement, and was generally notable for his autobiography, A Brown Buffalo, The Revolt of the Cockroach People, and for his companionship with American writer Hunter S. Thompson. Thompson portrayed him as a heavyweight Samoan lawyer, Dr. Gonzo, in his 1971 novel Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Acosta vanished in 1974 during an outing in Mexico and is assumed dead. He was only 39 years old when he went missing. His enigmatic disappearance was a dumbfounding bad tidings for his family and friends. Acosta was referred to as an aspiring and diligent man. He was the first one in his family to go to college. In 1966, he cleared the law exam, and in 1967 he started working as an attorney. A year later, the Chicano movement caught his interest, and he started working as an activist attorney. He moved to East Los Angeles and started representing the East Side 13. Acosta, who was a profoundly canny and enchanting person, became instrumental in pointing out more prominence in the Chicano development through talks and rallies and conventions. He additionally involved his lawful capacities in high-profile cases like that of the East Side 13, who in 1968 had to carry out 66 years in prison for their parts in the East LA victories, a colossal student walkout of Mexican Americans to request better education, per the Los Angeles Times. As per coordinator David Sanchez, Acosta was employed as a waiter in Aspen when he saw a video of the dispute between the protesters and the police. Oscar said he removed his apron, tossed it down on a table, and declared, "Those individuals need a legal counselor." Then he headed for LA, per a similar source. He was an eminent personality of the Chicano movement. After Thompson released Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, he filed a suit against Thompson's publishers. However, even though he filed a paper for the release of this novel, he still had a hold over these publishers and utilized this opportunity to release two of his most notable novels. But one sad and tragic day in 1974, Acosta disappeared without leaving so much as a trace behind. As indicated by LA Taco, the most recent individual Oscar Zeta Acosta was in touch with was his son, whom he had called to let him know he was in Sinaloa, Mexico. He was at absolutely no point ever heard from in the future. Until now, there has been no indication of whether he is alive or dead. His family accepts that the last option is almost certain, Some theories suggest that the relationship between Acosta and Thompson was falling to bits as Acosta had started requesting half income created from Fear and Loathing. It was reported that the last time he kept in touch with Thompson was November 1973. It is difficult to determine what term they both were on by the time Acosta disappeared. However, Thompson employed a confidential inspector to figure out what had been happening with Acosta after he vanished. Thompson revealed the time after he vanished when a man called Drake had come to Aspen to track down Thompson to reach out to Acosta, who he guaranteed owed him cash after leasing his boat to Acosta and a companion. Acosta and a Mexican boarded his boat with a heap of medications for sneaking into Bimini. Returning, everything was normal until they were off the south tip of the Biscayne Bay, and seemingly dazzling lights from all around suddenly appeared. They ended up in a trap, and as the fires poured down, the unknown Mexican was promptly shot in the head while Drake hit the deck searching for cover. Anyway, Acosta was dynamic and quick. He snatched the choke and the haggle straight into the boat. The last thing he recalled was that he felt the boat fly up. When they arrived at the shore, Acosta was carrying a small suitcase. Thompson, at absolutely no point, ever saw the man named Drake again in the future. Relisha Rudd. Relisha Tanau Rudd, born on October 29, 2005, was an 8-year-old girl who disappeared in Washington, D.C. in February 2014 and has not been found since. Rudd and her mother, Shamika Young, had been residing in the D.C. General Shelter. A 51-year-old man, Khalil Tantum, used to work at the same shelter as a janitor, and he had a criminal record for robbery, burglary, and breaking and entering. He was jailed from 1993 to 2003 and again from 2004 to 2011 following his criminal record. The Community Partnership for the Prevention of Homelessness employed him as a shelter house janitor. Tatum had a notorious image for his offensive behaviors, mainly involving young girls and for improperly hobnobbing with shelter occupants. Tatum befriended Young and lured her daughter into this trap by gifting her a tablet, and also took her to see Disney on Ice. Rudd and Tatum bonded well in a short time and were mostly seen having badgers and joking around. Ultimately, Young permitted Tatum to take Rudd to stay with him and his grandmother for the short term. In February, Rudd unexpectedly quit attending school. The school administration contacted her mother to inquire about her. However, her mom gave a note saying she was having medical issues and was being taken care of by a Dr. Tatum. She provided the contact details to the concerned administrator. The school reached Tatum at the given number, yet when he neglected to appear for a meeting with them, a guide reached the police to report Rudd missing. It wasn't until March 19th when the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia sent out a missing person test reporting she had not attended school in a month and was pronounced missing. Relisha had been missing from school for over 30 days before it was found she had been taken by Khalil Tatum, a janitor at the DC General Family Center, where she resided with her mom, stepfather, and 3 more siblings. Police sent out a broad pursuit. However, before they could examine Tatum regarding Relisha, they found him dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. His demise came over 7 days after they found his wife, Andrea Tatum, who was lethally shot in a motel room a month after Relisha was most recently seen. The examination unfolded the truth that Tatum and Rudd had been discovered on camera strolling down a foyer in a Holiday Inn Express in Northeast Washington, D.C., and on March 1st showed her walking with Tatum to a room in a Days Inn on New York Avenue in D.C. The March 1st film ended up being the last verification that Rudd was still alive. With this mysterious disappearance, various theories emerged. Like other mysteries, this addition to the missing person iceberg is as baffling and perplexing as any other on the record. There are several theories for what might have happened with Relisha, given Tatum's savage way of behaving soon after she vanished. Most authorities believe that she might have been murdered by Tatum or could have been a victim of sex trafficking. An investigator from the Washington Post thought that Tatum had been physically taking advantage of Relisha and conceivably pimping her to other people, and may have murdered his wife when she found out about his activities and whereabouts. Different speculations are that Ricky Sheridan Lyles, who is Tatum's brother-in-law, might be involved and might have killed Tatum. Jamila Larson, founder and director of the Homeless Children's Playtime Project, described an exchange with the police commander one morning, but he asked her all the details regarding Relisha and enlightened her about her disappearance. Larson has been an advocate for the Rudd case for over 8 years. Every year in March, to remember her unfortunate vanishing, she and her team hold posters high in hopes of finding her alive today. She explained how easy it is for young homeless girls to fall into traps of maliciousness. The city has since made changes pointed toward the other developing circumstances for homeless and destitute kids. The most noticeable one included shutting down DC General, a horrid spot with bugs that Relisha used to call the trap house. Smaller havens for families presently exist across the city, but there's still a long way to go to ensure complete safety and protection for them. Bobby Dunbar. Bobby Dunbar was born on May 23, 1908 in Opelousas, Louisiana. On August 23, 1912, Dunbar went on a road trip to Swayze Lake in Louisiana, where Bobby Dunbar, just 4 years old, vanished from nowhere. As the family played in the water, Leslie and Percy Dunbar were struck with the gut-wrenching news of their child's disappearance. When the thorough search for the son did not bear any fruit, the harrowing thought was that someone might have abducted their son. They contacted the higher authorities after their pursuit didn't turn up anything. The grief-stricken parents were terrified as this tragedy started turning into a mystery. The manhunt for Bobby Dunbar was started by the local and state police right after the complaint was filed. The police also presumed that the boy might have fallen into the lake and died on the spot. They started exploring the lake to draw a conclusive statement, hoping to find the body. When every lead and clue hit a dead end, they even analyzed gators and tossed explosives into the lake, trusting it would exude a body from the water. But to their surprise, none of their endeavors turned up a body. Despite all these efforts, his sudden vanishing couldn't be comprehended and left people dumbfounded. The Dunbars announced a generous $1,000 reward for anyone who found the boy. 8 months later, on April 13, 1913, after he mysteriously vanished, the Dunbars saw a silver lining in a dark cloud. When a kid matching Bobby's description had been tracked down in the Mississippi, this uplifting news revived their hopes. A man named William Cantwell Walters, a traveling jack of all trades, had been seen with the kid. When the authorities tracked him down, he guaranteed the kid was Charles Bruce Anderson, illegitimate offspring of his brother and a lady who worked for his family named Julia Anderson. He guaranteed that the kid, who he alluded to as Bruce, had been left in his guardianship while Julia went to go search for work. Even though his story was backed by his neighbors, the police still arrested him and the child was taken into custody. The initial reunion between the kid and the Dunbars remains questioned up until the present day. One paper asserted it was cheerful and that the kid yelled "mother" after seeing Leslie in a split second. Different records guaranteed that Leslie and Percy Dunbar were reluctant to affirm that the kid was Bobby. The following day, after bringing the kid back home at last and washing him, Leslie Dunbar said that she confidently recognized moles and scars on his body that affirmed he was her child. The Dunbars were then permitted to take little Bobby home and were officially declared his legal parents by the police. Even after his return, this enigmatic case raised questions and doubts if the Bobby who was returned to his parents was the real Bobby or not. This wasn't the end of this case, when the legacy went on even after 9 decades. Even long after the case was settled, the Dunbars and Andersons had uncertainties about what truly occurred back in 1913. Margaret Dunbar Cutright grew up knowing the tale of her granddad and this hazy situation in the family's genealogy. The story, as the Dunbar family told, it was that the kid, Margaret's granddad, was for sure Bobby, but was he? What started as an association project prompted a fanatical investigation of her family's ancestry. She started to scrutinize the account that had been given to her through the ages. For her entire life, Linda Traver, Julia Anderson's granddaughter, had been informed that her uncle was abducted by the Dunbar family, who had brought him up as a child that disappeared on that pivotal camping trip. Be that as it may, regardless of everything Traver was told, she had unanswered questions and nagging inquiries. Both Margaret Dunbar and Linda Traver diligently and persistently started investigating the reality regarding their family histories, regardless of whether it went against what they assumed they knew. Then, in 2004, Bob Dunbar Jr., child of Bobby Dunbar, Margaret Dunbar had been exploring and needed to demonstrate for the last time that her granddad was Bobby Dunbar. The DNA from Bobby Dunbar Jr. was contrasted with the DNA from his cousin, the child of Bobby Dunbar's younger sibling. The test was definitive. Bob Dunbar Jr. was not blood related with any of the Dunbar family. The kid the Dunbars had guaranteed as Bobby Dunbar an extremely long time ago was, as a matter of fact, Bruce, child of Julia Anderson. This news came as a serious blow to Dunbar, who for decades had believed the story they were made to believe. Although this mystery was settled once and for all, the fate of the real Bobby Dunbar remained an enigma. Many believe that Bobby Dunbar could have fallen in the swamp that day, and a child that small might have succumbed to death in the alligator-infested water. Jennifer Kesse. Jennifer Joyce Kesse, born on May 20th, 1981, is an American woman from Orlando, Florida, who has been missing since January 23, 2006. The weekend before she vanished, Kessie had taken a trip to St. Croix, U.S. Virgin Islands, with her boyfriend. They returned on Sunday, where Kessie spent the remaining evening at her boyfriend's house. The next morning on Monday, January 23, 2006, she drove straight to work. At 6 p.m. the same day, she was seen for the last time when she headed home from work. She talked to her father on a phone call while driving back home at around 6:15 p.m. and then afterward with her boyfriend at around 10 p.m. She had a pattern of calling or texting her boyfriend before leaving for work in the morning, but she did neither the next day on Tuesday. He presumed that it could have been a meeting she mentioned earlier. He later tried reaching her phone, but the call got transferred to voicemail every time. This worried him, and he contacted her parents to inquire if everything was okay. When her employer from work contacted her parents for the same reason, her parents became skeptical about the situation and took a 2-hour ride from Tampa to Orlando, her residence, where they noticed that her car was missing. The inside of her house seemed normal. To laid-out clothing, the condition of her home did not depict something out of the ordinary, instead suggested that she had been preparing to go to work that morning. The anxious parents, in their distraught, reached out to the higher authorities, and she was reported missing. Flyers about Kessie were put around that night by her friends and family, and the Orlando Police Department coordinated search parties by walking and riding horses, boat, helicopter, vehicles, and ATV. A detective was co-signed by the police to her apartment, and cross-examinations were initiated. 2 days later, on January 26, 2006, an unknown person was recorded parking her car and then walking away by a CCTV camera about a mile from her home. The police suggested that she might have been abducted. The vehicle was taken into custody for forensic analysis. The FBI was brought in to assist with deciding the individual's size and orientation. It could only say that the individual remained in the range of 5'3" and 5'5". The video was able to be enhanced to distinguish the suspect. Detectives were able to decipher some of the items placed inside the vehicle, and it was suggested that burglary was not the thought process for the situation. With numerous theories suggesting her disappearance, one of the more famous speculations is that Kessie might have been abducted on her way to work or while walking towards her car by a construction laborer who might have been working for her condominium complex. CBS News reported that Kessie told her parents that she was made to feel uncomfortable by some of those workers who catcalled and harassed her while they were working on the apartment complex, only a couple of weeks before she was reported missing. The case itself remains unsolved. Louis Le Prince. Louis Le Prince, born on August 28, 1841, was a French artist and a renowned inventor of the motion picture camera. He was known as the father of cinematography. On September 16, 1890, Louis Le Prince vanished, gone forever. Le Prince had guaranteed he would rejoin his companions in Paris for a return excursion to England. However, he neglected to show up at the delegated time and was never seen or heard by his family or companions. His last known location was him boarding a train leaving the Dijon station. Although both French police and Scotland Yard did a complete investigation for his body and baggage, neither was found. Various wild and generally unconfirmed speculations were proposed, including Jean Mitry's theory that proposed that Le Prince was killed. Therefore, he, in all probability, never boarded the train in Dijon. He likewise asked why, on the off chance that his brother, who was affirmed as the last individual to have seen Le Prince alive, knew Le Prince was self-destructive. He didn't attempt to stop Le Prince, and why he didn't report Le Prince's psychological state to the police before it was past the point of no return. Another theory suggested that he might have committed suicide by drowning when a photo of a man drenched in water was pulled from the Seine River in 1890, unequivocally looking like Le Prince. This was found in 2003 during research in the Paris police archives. This, in some way, prompted the end that he probably neglected to get his motion picture to work, had weighty obligations, and consequently decided to take his own life. Amidst all the speculations, he was formally pronounced dead in 1987. Kristen Smart. Kristen Denise Smart, an American woman, was born on February 20th, 1977. She was a freshman at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo when she vanished without a trace. To date, no trace of her existence has been detected. The speculations keep surfacing, but substantial proof is yet to be found. She is supposed to have been abducted, assaulted, and killed afterward. On the night of May 25, 1996, which fell on the Memorial Day weekend, she went to a frat house and attended a friend's birthday party. She did not have many acquaintances there, nor did her other friends accompany her to the party. One of her friends just dropped her off and then left. It was obvious that she had been drinking when around 2 a.m. people found her passed out in the neighbor's yard. The two students, Cheryl Anderson and Tim Davis, helped her get on her feet and accompanied her to her dorm. Halfway towards her dormitory, another student named Paul Flores joined to assist them and suggested he could safely take her from there, as his dorm was also close by. Davis withdrew from the gathering first since he lived off grounds and had headed to the party. Anderson was the second to withdraw from the gathering, going to the Sierra Madre Hall after she told Flores, who lived near to Smart's quarters, that he could walk her there. According to the police, Flores stated that he strolled Smart as far as his dorm, Santa Lucia Hall, and afterward permitted her to stroll back to her Muir Hall residence by herself. The University Police Department initially thought that Smart had gone on an unannounced excursion, as was normal among students over special times of the year, and subsequently was delayed in reporting her as a missing individual to higher authorities. She was just announced missing after 7 days, despite her family calling the police prior. After she was officially reported missing, several volunteers initiated a search party by riding horses and using ground-penetrating radar devices to locate any trace that could provide a helpful lead in finding her. Even though her body was never found, Paul Flores remained a prime suspect in the case. He was formally investigated by the police 6 days after her disappearance, but he stood his ground by saying he had dropped her off near his dorm and she took off alone. But James Murphy, the Smart's lawyer, says that later when cadaver dogs were brought by the sheriff's office to the Cal Poly dormitories, they alarmed on Paul Flores' room and bed. Only weeks after the incident, Kristen's baffled and distraught parents employed an attorney, James Murphy, who documented an unjust passing claim against Paul Flores. As per James Murphy, young girls on campus reported that he had a bad reputation among girls, as on various occasions, he'd make them uncomfortable and regarding him as a creep. 5 months after Kristen Smart vanished, Paul Flores was brought before a grand jury, yet no charges were documented against him. In October 1996, the case received the spotlight again when Mary Lassiter was renting Paul Flores' mom's home in Arroyo Grande when she tracked down a lady's hoop in the carport. She says the gems seemed to match Kristen Smart's neckband in one of the missing posters. The earring was sent to a San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Office investigator for forensic analysis, but was never labeled as leading evidence and was lost. Between 1996 and 2007, different searches for her remaining parts and other proof were conducted, some utilizing cadaver dogs prepared to recognize the aroma of remaining human parts, including searches of properties possessed by Flores' family. No valuable leads were found for almost 2 decades. Several extensive investigations, including digging up of Flores' property and Cal Poly campus, was conducted, and these efforts finally started yielding results when numerous items of interest were found in an extensive investigation conducted at Paul Flores' property in 2020. On April 20th, 2021, it was reported by the investigator that their certain Kristen's body had been covered underneath the deck of Ruben Flores' home, but as of late had been taken out. The organic proof was found by utilizing ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. On April 13th, 2021, the now 44-year-old Paul Flores was charged with Kristen Smart's homicide and his father as an accomplice. On September 22nd, 2021, appointed authority covered the 2 men and will stand trial. Etan Patz. Etan Patz, born on October 9, 1972, was an American boy who was 6 years old on May 25, 1979, when he vanished on his way to the school bus stop in the Soho neighborhood of Lower Manhattan. Etan's vanishing resounded a long way past his area. The date of his vanishing, May 25th, was assigned by President Ronald Reagan as National Missing Children's Day, as this case helped the creation in 1984 of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. During his morning stroll to the school bus, his disappearance helped end a period where parents or guardians felt open to allowing their kids to wander around alone. Julie Patz, Etan's mother, described that things were feverish in the Patz family on the morning of May 25, 1979, the last day of school before the Memorial Day weekend. Etan's mom, Julie, who ran a daycare out of the family's space in Soho, had 2 two-year-olds to tend to as her younger child and another kid who had remained the evening. She was caught up the entire morning. Etan, however, awoke in that morning and had been pushing for more freedom like any other young kid. Amid the clamor of the daycare, he recognized an open door. He needed to stroll to school without help from anyone else. Miss Patz, with some hesitance, concurred. According to her, he gathered his backpack, the one given to him by a friend's mom, and a $1 bill intending to purchase a soft drink on the way. That was the last time she saw her son. The grief-stricken parents reported to the police and started their search in hopes of finding their little boy. Police and volunteers went door to door carrying his photo, asking if anyone had a lead on the little boy's disappearance. The police suspected he had been abducted, but no legal evidence was found. The mystery remained perplexing until a suspect recognized as Jose Antonio Ramos, a convicted sex offender who had been a companion of Etan's previous babysitters, was tracked down. In 1982, numerous young men had blamed Ramos for attempting to draw them into a channel pipe in the space where Ramos was residing. When the police looked through the channel pipe, they found photos of Ramos and little boys who looked like Etan. Etan's body was never found, and he was pronounced lawfully dead on June 19, 2001. Stan and Julie Patz sought after a case against Ramos in 2004. Ramos still denied that he killed Etan. He carried out a 20-year jail sentence in the State Correctional Institution in Dallas, Pennsylvania for child molestation. He was set free from jail on November 7, 2012. In a flabbergasting turn of events, the case reopened on May 14, 2012. The New York police magistrate Raymond Kelly declared that a man who had embroiled himself in Etan's disappearance was in custody. A 51-year-old man named Pedro Hernandez of Maple Shade, New Jersey, was recognized and said that Hernandez had admitted to choking the youngster. The legal proceedings couldn't find substantial evidence proving his confession, but after a psychological analysis, he was pledged guilty based on his confession. Hernandez was condemned to life in jail after the trial. Kyron Horman. Kyron Richard Horman was born on September 9, 2002 in Portland, Oregon. Forgive me for the pronunciation, to Desiree Young, and Kane Horman, a designer for Intel. The couple separated after 8 months into Young's pregnancy with Kyron. His custody was handed to both of them in 2004. However, after his diagnosis of kidney failure, Kane took over the complete responsibility to provide him with extensive medical care. On June 4, 2010, Kyron, accompanied by his stepmother, Terry Horman, went to Skyline Elementary School, who stayed with him while he attended a science fair. Terry Horman stated that she left the school at around 8:45 a.m. after dropping him off, and that she last remembered seeing Kyron strolling down the hall to his first class. However, Kyron was never seen in his first class and was instead marked absent that day. Terry's assertions to the police demonstrate that after leaving the school at 8:45 a.m., she got things done at 2 different Fred Meyer supermarkets until around 10:10 a.m. Then at that point, and at 11:39 a.m., she expressed that she was driving her girl in and out of town, trying to utilize the movement of the vehicle to calm the child's ear infection. Terry said that she then, at that point, went to a fitness center and exercised until around 12:40 p.m. According to her, by 1:21 p.m., she had returned and posted photographs of Kyron at the science fair on Facebook. Later that evening, at 3:30 p.m., Terry and her husband Kane strolled with their girl, Kiara, to the bus station to meet Kyron. To their dismay, when Kyron failed to show up at the bus station, the transport driver let them know that the kid had not boarded the transport and asked them to call the school about his whereabouts. Terry did as such just to learn the information from the school secretary that Kyron had never shown up to the class that morning and was marked absent. Kane was shocked by this unfortunate news, and various negative thoughts started to haze his mind. Acknowledging that the kid was missing, the secretary called 911 and the biggest missing people search in Oregon history to date was started. Despite the continuous collective efforts, the boy couldn't be located. None of the details added to anything over doubt until about a month into the examination when a bombshell was dropped. For 10 days, Horman's case was viewed as a missing individuals one. However, at that point, authorities declared it was formally a criminal examination. When repeated efforts did not yield or bear any fruit, and another day of Kyron missing, it dawned on Terry that the last person seen with him was seen as a prime suspect. Amidst the search, in late June 2010, Kane was supposedly told by investigation that Terry had offered their exterior decorator, Rodolfo Sanchez, a truckload of cash to kill her husband. Sanchez affirmed in a statement that Terry contacted him to assist with killing her husband in January 2010, 5 months prior to Kyron's vanishing. However, in her testimony, Terry denied the charge. Investigators persuaded Sanchez to defy Terry while wearing a microphone, yet they couldn't get any proof and couldn't make an arrest. On June 28th, Kane petitioned for divorce and got a controlling request against Terry, and the separation was granted. During this time, Terry failed 2 separate polygraph assessments concerning Kyron's disappearance. In August 2010, it was declared by law enforcement authorities that they were looking for an individual purportedly seen by 2 observers sitting inside Terry's truck outside Skyline Elementary the day of the disappearance. There had been speculation that a teacher could have been involved. that Kyron was being sexually abused due to behavioral issues he had recently displayed, or maybe someone else in that school was preparing him over an extensive period and then utilized the science fair as a valuable chance to move him. All these theories lingered over time, but tragically no authentic proof was found. Hence, no arrests were made. This mystery remains unsolved with the ongoing police investigations to date. Assata Shakur. Shakur was born on July 16, 1947, in the Jamaican neighborhood of the New York ward of Queens, even though she spent quite a bit of her childhood in North Carolina. In her 20s, she returned to New York and became associated with the Black Panther Party. She belonged to the Black Liberation Army and was sentenced to the first-degree murder of State Trooper Warner Forrester during a shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973. On this, there is no conflict that Shakur was on the New Jersey Turnpike on May 2, 1973, when she and two different individuals from the Black Liberation Army were pulled over by two state officers. There was a showdown, and State Trooper Warren Forrester and a BLA member were killed. Shakur was convicted for first-degree murder, furnished burglary, and different wrongdoings in 1977, and was condemned to life in jail, per police reports. However, less than 2 years later, she escaped the prison with the alliance of an extremist group called The Collective, which held two guards captive during an armed attack at the New Jersey jail where she was detained. They guided Shakur to an escape group and later re-emerged in Cuba. Since her breakout, she has been accused of an unlawful trip to avoid imprisonment. Shakur is one of FBI's most wanted terrorists on charges of domestic terrorism, and there is a $2 million prize for her apprehension. Initially, Shakur and others stated that she was targeted by the FBI merely for being involved with the Black Liberation Army. But years later, in Cuba, she was asked about the BLA's supposed contribution to the killing of the cops. She said, "As a general rule, armed battle generally has been utilized by individuals to free themselves. Yet, the inquiry lies in when individuals utilize armed battle. There were individuals who took the position that it was time to oppose and combat, and if the people of color didn't begin to retaliate against police ruthlessness and didn't begin to wage an equipped opposition, we would be obliterated." A few years later, she was seen in a grainy video with dreadlocks walking around a market in Cuba. There, she could supposedly be seen walking around and grinning at the camera. In another scene, she wears a dark t-shirt, her long hair separated to uncover the words outlined, "Imprisoned Exile." In the video, Assata Shakur's voice was sharp and delicate, in conflict with how she is a famous criminal sentenced for the homicide of a New Jersey state officer. The recording came from a narrative shot in Cuba where Shakur, aka Joanne Deborah Chesimard, has lived since the mid-1980s under political shelter. It was a commemoration of her radical politics. In it, she calls herself a revolutionary seeking liberation for my people. Shakur's 1977 conviction and later escape from jail have not only made her a symbol of black power, but also the very first lady to be named to the FBI's most wanted terrorist list. To date, her other whereabouts remain unknown. Tara Calico. Tara Leah Calico, born on February 28, 1969, was an American woman who vanished close to her home in Belen, New Mexico on September 20th, 1988. On Tuesday, September 20th, 1988, Calico left her home at around 9:30 a.m. to go on her day-to-day bicycle ride along the New Mexico State Road 47. She rode that course daily and was sometimes joined by her mom, Patty Dowell. However, Dowell quit riding with Calico after she felt she had been followed by a driver. She remained home that day as a driver almost ran her off the street during their last excursion. Dowell said that the individual was driving forcefully and appeared to focus on her and her girl. As well as driving perilously near the pair, the driver passed them on different occasions along the course. She even encouraged her daughter to contemplate carrying mace, yet Calico dismissed the idea. Even though Dowell communicated her interest to her daughter, Calico believed her mom was going a little overboard. Genuine Crime Times reports Dowell requested that Calico take a container of pepper spray on the off chance that she ran into any difficulty. On the morning of Calico's vanishing, she had told Dowell to come and get her if she was not home by early afternoon, as she had plans to play tennis with her boyfriend at 12:30. When Tara Calico had gotten back by early afternoon, her mom promptly headed to Highway 47 to search for her. As announced by the Charlie Project, Tara Calico took a similar course consistently. Patty Dowell said she drove along the whole course and did not see any indication of her girl or the bike she was riding that day. She reached the higher authorities right away. The Charlie Project reports Calico's Sony Walkman tape player was subsequently tracked down close to John F. Kennedy campsite, which is around 19 miles east of Highway 47. The well suggested that her daughter might have consciously dropped the things to leave hints concerning her whereabouts. Her presumed abduction was not witnessed by any passerby, but some people did report a light-shaded pickup truck with the camper shell following intently behind her. As announced by TerraCalico.com, Calico might not have understood the truck was following her since she had her earphones on while she was riding. Despite directing a comprehensive search of the area, no hint of Terry Calico or her bicycle was detected. 9 months after her vanishing, repeated efforts to track her down did not yield any result, and the doubts about her being alive or not started fogging the minds of her family and friends. Authorities were made aware of a troubling sign at last connected to the missing girl. On June 15, 1989, a lady was waiting for a parking space occupied by a white Toyota van with no windows. At that point, when the driver of the van, who was portrayed as a man in his 30s with a mustache, pulled out of the spot, the lady pulled in and left her vehicle. As revealed by True Crime Times, the lady found a Polaroid picture on the ground when she got out of the vehicle. The photograph was of a boy and a young teen or a lady bound and choked with tape. They could be seen lying in the freight area of what gave off an impression of being a white van on top of certain covers and cushions. The kid and young lady both appeared to be in trouble. Even though Dewell persuaded the young lady in the photograph was Calico, authorities were not as certain. The photo was shipped to the FBI, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and New Scotland Yard in the UK for additional review. Although the FBI and the Los Alamos National Laboratory couldn't affirm the recognition of the young lady in the photograph, True Crime Times report New Scotland Yard affirmed that it was Tara Calico. Although the photograph confirmed the speculations of her abduction, a photograph couldn't help reach a concrete lead that would help locate her. It wasn't until April 2010 that a man named Henry Brown made a deathbed confession that he was aware of Tara Calico's vanishing. As revealed by True Crime Times, Brown said Leroy Chavez, Lawrence Romero Jr., and Dave Silva let him know that they hit Calico with the truck while she was riding her bicycle. They then drove her to a rock pit and sexually assaulted her. When she threatened to go to the police, Chavez and Silva allegedly held her down while she was stabbed to death by Lawrence Romero Jr. Henry said Lawrence Romero Jr.'s father, Valencia County Sheriff Rene Rivera, helped conceal the wrongdoing by obliterating the child's noted disclosure. In 2013, True Crime Times reported specialists from a few neighborhoods and government organizations framed a team to investigate Calico's vanishing. Be that as it may, no arrests were made because of their examination, and to this day, it remains a mystery. Emma Fillipoff. Emma Fillipoff is a Canadian woman born on January 6, 1986, and went missing on November 28, 2012. Disappearing from the front of Empress Hotel in Victoria, British Columbia at 26 years old. Fillipoff moved to Victoria in the fall of 2011 from Perth, Ontario, due to her work. Since the work was occasional, Fillipoff left the work on October 31, 2012. She guaranteed coworkers that she would be back in the spring. The timeline of her disappearance shows that on November 23rd, security footage showed that she was exhibiting an erratic pattern in which she could be seen entering the apartment multiple times and pacing back and forth to avoid some confrontation with someone outside the apartment. A few days before her disappearance, she had called her mother several times asking if she could come over, but her conversation always seemed confusing as she would instantly change the subject and ask her to visit later. On November 28th, her mother heard from her for the last time when she was staying at the Sandy Merriman house. According to her mother, her tone seemed paranoid and concerning, and even though Fillipoff told her not to come, her mother booked a flight to Victoria to check up on her, who reached Sandy Merriman house at around 11 p.m., 3 hours after Fillipoff was last sighted. Various CCTV footage obtained the next day proved her eccentric pattern of behavior. On November 28th, Fillipoff had been caught on a 7-Eleven store video on Government Street buying a prepaid cell phone. The video showed her being reluctant to leave the store, looking at the road outside. She returned to the 7-Eleven to purchase a preloaded charge card for $200. She went out at around 6 p.m. that day. Soon later, she flagged down a taxi and requested to be taken to the Victoria International Airport. However, she soon left the taxi after being unable to pay the fare, even though she had a $200 prepaid card. Minutes after this, Fillipoff was seen strolling shoeless before the Empress Hotel. A colleague of hers, Dennis Quay, called 911 to say that a woman in serious distress was outside the hotel. Victoria police showed up, took Fillipoff's name, and spent 45 minutes talking with her, concluding that she was not a danger to herself or any other individual. They then released her. Soon after that, police met Fillipoff's mom at Sandy Merriman House, and by midnight, Fillipoff was delegated as a missing person. Ever since the incident, no trace of her has been found. Some of her friends claim that she had severe depression and paranoia, but these speculations linger on as no concrete evidence behind her disappearance could be devised. She is still missing to this day. If you've made it this far, thank you for taking a big chunk out of your time to watch or listen to another one of these Iceberg tier videos. I edited this one a little bit differently than the last one. The last one might have included a bit more substance, I guess you could describe it as. I don't know going forward how I'm going to edit these videos. I'm still kind of here and there about how I should do it. I don't know if I should just straight up film myself talking about it, or I should just do it like I did the last one, or I should do it how I did it, this way. If anybody has any suggestions on how they would want to see these videos presented or, listen to, just let me know and I'll take it into consideration and I'll decide on what to do with the next one. So once again, thank you for watching.